write it down after my note, and and again reading about it. So hopefully I'm getting it. But the we talked about that when you eat the food, and then we break down, and then we release the elemental being, release. But that they are going to those beings releasing within the body, and right.
Yeah, within our being,
Yeah.
They can become part of, the sorting part, which is a more conscious decision-making part. So you have these things which are done, and but you still have the elemental beings. Really, in each one of these have tasks of choices to make. Just like our own etheric. Our own etheric, as he says in the beginning, is what is guiding these processes.
Yeah.
But that etheric is being replenished by the elemental etheric that we get access to from the food that we eat. But it's also being completely transformed. I don't know if you probably read that toward the end. He talks about how our etheric is complete, and when it's born, at its birth, it's completely changed over from what we inherit. It's new. And so all these the stuff of these elemental beings that's released is also changed. It's adapted. It's not the same etheric force that we ingested. It gets transformed also, and then we use it for our purposes.
Are they also assimilating to?
What do you mean? What you mean? Are they being assimilated, or are they being assimilated? But they're being transformed. They could be if they were just assimilated. It would be just like with our hereditary behavior. Assimilation everything has to be transformed. It has to be transformed. If it's not transformed, then that's probably going to be dysfunction in the body. If we don't completely transform what we take in, then it's probably going to be
on the same shape or same thing, but it's kind of like not exactly same way.
Right, exactly. Yeah. It's individualized by our own ego forces in some way. And that's essential because if he talks about this duality, when we work on things and change them, the capacity that we're using to do that work is also transformed, is also affected. So when we use a capacity to change something else, the capacity itself is also changed and metamorphosis. So.
And also all individual, how do they do this process is different. So.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Also the ego, using ego too. So also everyone's etheric is a different way it works.
Exactly. That's we're all individual. At least it should be. And to the degree that we don't, we get the heredity. And the hereditary thing we get is going to be closer to a common. And if it stays common, then that will probably result in some kind of illness or dysfunction as we mature. We have to take it and make it individualized for it to really be a part of our being in a healthy way. So that individualization is really essential.
But from that, my question is also, young children are still more strongly heredity area.
Right.
So.
And they're beginning to do the work. He says in this what I was reading for this week, how children will try. Okay.
Bye.
I should look it up to get exactly what he says, but he talks about how children will automatically try to do the work they have to do on their own, but they will probably not do it very well. That's why we have to be there as guides. So the hereditary clay is there. The children will try to work it, but if the children are left to their own resources without our guidance, then it probably won't go the way it needs to go. We are essential. The teacher is essential. The parents or the adults are essential in guiding the maturation process.
That's the way children learn from imitation.
Right, exactly. They can't do it out of their own resources completely.
Which is our question also. So many children don't imitate.
Exactly. They don't even bring that capacity.
Yeah.
And so without that capacity, even if we are feeding them, resources, they don't take it up.
Yeah.
Right. And so, we talked about last time how we can make an analogy in terms of what you're doing as the teacher with this whole process of taking in, adapting, and breaking down. That what the curriculum that we bring is going to undergo the same processes, the curriculum that we bring. And so we got to be asking ourselves that question. Are we offering something that children can take in? Are we supporting their resources to adapt that, to make it, right for their own beings? Then when they break it down, can they break it down? Is it something that's digestible and therefore can be used to build up something new? And so those are good questions to ask, an analogy. And so now we're going on the other side of that. And so then you have this sorting being who is sort of guiding those processes. And now we're on the side where, say for instance, we've been successful in presenting the curriculum. Now the child we can ask ourselves, what does it mean, maintenance? We presented the curriculum, the child has broken it down, digested it. How are they going to use what we have given them for the maintenance of their body? What does it mean that they provide growth in their learning? And what does it mean for them to bring new things into being? And so I would think that's an area to go in to see if we can look at from what he says, if we can find an analogy. In a sense, my goal, and I can say if this would be your goal too, is to have an analogy with these 7 life processes to the work that you do as a teacher. That's what I'm at. So then I think you will be able to use that to penetrate into the physical processes. So we can ask ourselves, we're addressing the etheric as teachers. And in addressing the etheric, these 7 life processes are going on just in the etheric that we're addressing. And then determining how we address the etheric, their own etheric will then address their physical body. So we are going to be engaged in what happens to their physical body through addressing the etheric. And we can make a connection to the physical body by thinking about our actions in terms of the 7 life processes. How are they taking in what we give? How are they adapting to it? How are they digesting it? And how are they using it to maintain their being? How does growth come about? So we can. That's what I would think we can kind of talk about and try to explore.
So is this, if we talk about the imitation as a product, the last seventh life process, the reproduction, is like a imitation itself?
Well, I think the reproduction is imaginative play.
Okay, using for the play.
Which comes out of it, like for instance, I think that maintenance, the 5th life process, maintenance, is imitation.
Oh, okay. See, I was confused about that part also when you were talking about and then thinking about so if they imitate, it's not the goal yet, right? So
right.
Imitate and then utilize that imitation to other things.
Right, because they're using imitation out of the breaking down, out of the digestion of what we give them, then they will imitate.
Yeah.
And then that imitation will actually maintain their, we can call their maturation and their emancipation. It will be which will keep their beingness active in the process of building up their actual physical organs, but also building up the free etheric also. So it is the imitation which does both things. It makes possible the development of the organ systems, and it also makes possible the freeing of the etheric.
So is the freeing etheric is you said in imitation or growing? It's a growing process, right?
Well, when it's freed by imitation, then it can be part of the growing. So first it has to be freed.
Oh, so that the free still maintain part is a freeing.
Right, it's freeing. It is freeing. It's not the you're not utilizing the freed,
so the
but it's freeing.
Freeing gesture is imitation.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
By doing the imitation, they're doing the work that will allow the freeing of the etheric.
Okay.
Because if they don't imitate, that means that basically their organs aren't going to be developed and individualized. And so the etheric is going to have to keep at it. It's not going to develop its capacity for freedom. And so it's kind of like it's these things are working right together with sorting, coordinating. So this is going right like that. The breaking down, the digestion of what we give them is then being directed into imitation, and the imitation then does the work of building up the organ system and also freeing the etheric. And so that's maintenance. And so you could stay there.
What did you say this one?
This is breaking down.
Breaking down.
Yeah, breaking down is is going to give you the resources for the imitation or for the maintenance. That's what the breaking down does. It breaks down. To a certain degree, that breaking down also frees the elemental beings, but they still have to be worked on. So the breaking down frees the elemental beings to a certain degree, but they still have to be worked on to be made useful for the body. And then also with that, we can say with the resources they get out of that breaking down, they now can do imitation. They now can do imitation. And they can then, they really, and since what the breaking down does, we can go back to the breaking down is really the accommodation of the learning schemas they have. We talked about assimilation and accommodation. Mm-hmm. So accommodation is breaking down the schemas, the reflexes, so that you can have more access. Accommodation does that. When we have this, Piaget's learning process is assimilation and accommodation, and then accommodation is what accommodation does is that you say you have a learning. We talked about it last time. You have a learning schema like putting things in your mouth. Now this is going to be broken down into its parts so that you can have more freedom. I don't have to do the whole thing. I can do part of the thing, the part that is necessary to imitate with. So I'm developing my capacity to imitate by having those learning schemas break down. Because if they don't break down, then I'm just stuck in the reflex. Mm-hmm. But then I end up breaking it down and taking the schema and seeing that part of the schema, I can use part of the schema by bringing in another sense of something. And so that's the breaking down part. And then the breaking down gives you more behavioral resources for imitation. You don't have those behavioral resources. So I'm going to write behavioral resources come from the breaking down of the schemas. The behavioral resources for imitation. Now over here you break down the innate schemas. But innate is probably two N's, right? Innate schemas. So we bring these innate schemas, the reflexes. behavioral schemas. These behavioral schemas are broken down, and then they become the behavioral resources for imitation. And so they would go like that. And then, of course, you have growth.
Yeah.
And what we get the capacity for, growth is associated with adapting. And adapting is, of course, making what you take in compatible with your own being, usually through the warming and cooling process. And so we have these behavioral schemas that are now resources for imitation. Now, what we have to do with these, growth is actually, I'm thinking it's going to be the actual capacity for picture forming that develops out of here. Because imitation leads directly to a capacity for picture forming. And like, say for instance, and you can think of it in terms of picture forming, gives you the capacity for correspondence. It gives you the capacity to, correspondence, to make wholes out of things, like to remember, like in the morning I had breakfast, and I can remember that as an episode. Then I also can look at a picture and see it as a whole and not be on the parts. And then comparison, and the ability to see differences. This is what picture forming gives, the capacity it gives for the first grade and on up. So picture forming comes out of imitation. And we can say that's the growth that we can expect the child to be able, because what the picture forming does is gives you ways of relating to your environment differently. You have pictures about your environment. And that's what adapting does. Adapting allows you to be able to relate physically different to your body. You can take stuff in you can go to different environments, and in those different environments you can take stuff in, and since you have the ability to inwardly change it to fit you, that allows you to live in different environments.
So is that also the assimilation?
Well, yeah, assimilation is the first phase of it. So, but then you are doing assimilation. You assimilate things. Yes, exactly.
Adapting part is assimilation.
Right, and so that means you can take things that are given to you from the external world, and you can make them serve you. You can adapt them to serve you. And and this does the opposite of that. You develop a picture capacity that allows you to understand the world in a way that allows you then to go out and adapt the world. It goes the opposite direction. That's what happens for the young child. And once they start getting pictures about the world and start being able to understand it through those pictures, then they can go reach out and change the world and adapt the world. So it goes, here's the process is coming, things are coming at us, and we're adapting those things as they come at us. But in growth, we're actually adapting the world. In terms of our learning, we're learning. Growth is the ability to live in different environments. That's what growth is. If you don't
other beings.
Right, because otherwise you'd be stuck in one environment if you never grew, and you couldn't go into another environment and do anything. So just because you can adapt something to your inner life, it may be that you can't do that in another situation. You have to be in a certain place. But the ability to move out and to change the world you're in, and that's what the child begins to do right here. The child begins to go out and change the world and make the world over and do different things with the world. And of course, that's what leads to imaginative play. So you have imitation that comes out of these behavioral resources. This is a freeing of the etheric, of course. This is what happens to the freed etheric. Imitation frees the etheric, and that freed etheric is then available for picture forming. To the degree that the etheric doesn't get freed by this imitation behavior, then picture forming doesn't happen, and therefore growth isn't possible. And of course, then the last thing we have is bringing into being.
And that makes sense. Imitation is a free aesthetic. Also, you also said about that. The imitation is a productive imitation.
Right.
Primitive. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So then we have bringing into being. And this bringing into being is when we then, out of picture forming, can create a whole inner reality that we can then give birth to in the world, which is a cognitive reproduction. Of course, there's actual, at a certain point we have actual physical reproduction, but we have this capacity for cognitive reproduction out of the developed picture forming. And this of course is related to taking in. Because all of this is going to depend on what we take in. That's what we give birth to is going to depend on what we take in.
Okay.
And so that's why
I wanted to make sure much more how am I understanding those relations, those two pairs.
Right. And so we do this taking in, and there's already a part of our eye which is already looking at what we're going to bring into being. So it's already adapting what we're taking in to fit in our internal world. See, this is the purpose already. It's future oriented. This taking in is already future oriented. We're making choices about what we're going to take in so that we can come to bringing into being. And we have to be in control. We have to be thinking about that too. What are the children taking in? What kind of future? What are they going to be able to give birth to if we give this?
This part, which also we're trying to talk to parents.
Yes.
And then it's very, very challenging.
Yes. Yeah.
So how we can really bring in that move parents to do the action.
Right. Yeah. And this whole thing about the difference between capacities and skills. And he talks about that too, And this is a conversation that's so hard with the parents. Parents are so skill oriented, and they can see that skills are pure to come from the outside, and so they don't think it matters then. Well, it doesn't matter what the children take in. The skills are something they're going to acquire from the outside later on. They think that they think developmentally that you have to develop to a certain point before you can get certain skills, but it's more than that. You have to metamorphose capacities.
Our teaching area is,
because it's the difference between development and metamorphosis. You have development, which is necessary. People, they know it's necessary for skills, but they don't have this idea of metamorphosis. That capacities are metamorphosing.
I try to work with parents for parents to understand this part, and then I brought the clay and then it was kind of like a building, and then try to show them visually. This is the capacity. And then we are not putting anything yet. We are building this capacity.
Right.
And then I wasn't really sure parents really got it or not.
Right. Yeah. Because it's like you can build a house, but there are certain things you need. Like, for instance, the lumber and the bricks or whatever has to be shaped first so that it's available to build the house with.
Yeah.
And if it's not shaped properly, if the resources for the house are not, of proper strength or proper shape, then you can't build a house with it. And so these capacities are what allow us to get skills. And we have to understand what is going to have the metamorphosis of these capacities so that they become what they need to be to acquire the skills. And you can get very concrete with that.
Yeah, I think I gave a concrete part. My clay part is, I kind of, like I said, by first third of 7 years, 2.5,
Mhm.
1/3,
Mhm.
that's a time to finding the materials, how to
Right.
make the pot, clay. If someone
Right.
bring clay, it will be good material. If someone bring the sand,
Right.
how can we do that? We need a much more outside
Right.
intervention things. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think, you gave them a picture of what I can say, the relationship between capacities and skills. But I'm saying they need to know what exactly are the capacities and how they relate to the skills. Like for instance, one of the capacities that you want in the first grade is correspondence. That's the ability, which like the ability for the child to like for one of them is like to count. The child can count. Some children can count 1, 2, 3. Other children count 1, 2, 3. They don't have any correspondence. They can say 1, 2, 3, but they don't have a correspondence of 1, 2, 3. You tell them to count, they'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's no correspondence. So the capacity for correspondence, which is going to be built out of the sense of touch, it's going to be built out of touch.
I think I don't really get it. 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3.
Correspondence, the word correspondence means that this is two things correspond.
Yeah.
And so my verbalizations must correspond with something on the outside. So if I say count these things, and one child goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, they have correspondence as a capacity. If the other child goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, they don't have correspondence. They can call out the sounds, but they don't have correspondence.
Well, I don't get it. Why? Because I think you are showing something, right? And then counting.
But I'm asking the children to like I would show them, I'll count first. And then I ask them to count, but they don't correspond their counting. They don't correspond it to things. They just make it a verbal
it's just
thing.
Only saying.
They're only saying it.
Okay.
And so that means they don't have correspondence. They don't have correspondence. Well, correspondence develops out of the sense of touch.
Yeah.
So that means the sense of touch is actually underdeveloped. Because you learn boundary also out of the sense of touch. So this sense of touch has to metamorphose into this capacity for correspondence, which then allows for skill of counting. So I'm saying and that's what I'm saying. I'm just, when I meant the word concrete, I mean if they can concretely say, here's the sense of touch. The sense of touch is related to the capacity for correspondence. The capacity for correspondence is then develops into the skill for counting. So if you don't do what you need for the sense of touch and make sure that what the children take in through touch is going to really develop their capacity for understanding boundaries, then they won't be able to count later on. They won't be able to acquire the skill because that sense of touch won't metamorphosis. Because for each skill there's touch, there's a sense, there's a sense, there's the perception. What do we perceive through touch? We perceive boundary. Actually, what we perceive is boundary. So that's what we perceive. We perceive. Some children can't perceive boundary between themselves and others or between things. They don't really perceive boundary. And then that develops into correspondence, the capacity. So for a child, they have the sense. They must learn to perceive boundary, and that will give them the capacity of correspondence. And then that will allow them to have the skill of counting. The skill. So you have this thing. First there's a sense that that you're working on in the kindergarten. You're working on the sense of touch. so that it will develop the perception of boundary. And then out of that perception of boundary, the capacity for correspondence will be there. And out of the capacity for correspondence, then you will get the skill of counting. So you can show the parents that concretely this makes this move from one to the other. So that you can't just say the child later on will learn the skill for counting. If they don't develop the sense of touch, they won't develop the skill for counting. If they don't perceive boundary out of that, then they won't develop the correspondence capacity, and therefore they won't be able to get the skill of counting. This is just one example, but there's one of these for each one. And I should talk to you all more about that in kindergarten, so you can tell the parents specifically, this is what the sense of touch is related to in learning.
Yeah, this is really hard to. I think we talked about the touch sense, and then we talked about that. But by the time we give report, we don't really talk about that deep touch sense level.
Mm-hmm.
So just only when we touch someone, they're okay. But much more deep meaning,
right.
We don't really talk about it. And then
right.
we talk about the other places, like about maybe some cognitive kind of like a delay or something.
Right.
And then we talked about we don't really go back to that.
Right. Because you all should be able to go to the touch, and you should be able to go to the sense of well-being, and you can do this for each one of the fundamental four senses, well-being, and then there's another one for the sense of balance. And movement. They all have a process of development that leads to a skill. So well-being, that sense, develops a sense of, allows you to perceive, perception is wholeness. Yeah, you perceive wholeness. You can perceive a whole thing. Because out of well-being, what happens is the child, out of their sense of well-being, can think of their own lives. They can go back out of their sense of well-being and remember when they felt well. Oh, I remember this morning breakfast. And they can remember breakfast as a whole picture. So out of our sense of our own complete well-being, we develop a sense of episodic memory, or wholes, which is very important. Develop those capacity for wholes. I forgot the capacity for these two, wholeness, perceive wholeness, and the capacity that you get out of that wholeness. Why am I forgetting this? Movement. Well, I can go back and reference that. I don't know if I got exactly what all of them are now. But I'm just saying that you can be very concrete. You can give that big picture that you talked about how metamorphosis develops. How you need to write things so it can metamorphose. It can be like you need to write clay. You can't have sand. That's a good overall picture. Then you can say specifically how that happens with touch, sense of well-being, sense of balance, sense of movement. I think that will be helpful. The parents can concretely see how that metamorphosis and change happens. We can get back to this now.
Yeah. Also, he writes about after this chapter is four senses he talks about.
Right.
Yeah.
And so he'll probably give. I don't know what his. Oh yeah, he does the four senses in the same way that. He does actually the 12 senses. He does the four senses, but he develops it all the way up to the 12 senses by the end of the book, and how they're interrelated because they have a similar polarity. But anyway, so just to get the picture we have this picture of these 7 processes and how they're related, their polar relationships, and how the only thing that I'm a little bit still unclear about. I know this one is a light ether. This one's light ether.
Mm-hmm.
This one is warmth.
Maintain.
I'm a little bit confused between these two. I had taken in,
Is that sorting is chemical?
yeah, sorting was chemical maybe. I was kind of weird because chemical had to do with bonding and unbinding. And that's why I didn't quite get the connection with sorting right off the bat. Taking in is the life ether. Which kind of makes sense right here, since it's death and birth, and it's related to bringing into being.
Mm-hmm.
So life ether would go
Yeah.
here. Chemical ether has to do with, I guess things that band together. That's what it determines what things can go together. That's what the chemical ether does. It says it binds and unbinds, and so that's how it's doing that. And then maintenance, whatever you break down here, has to be put together for the organ formation, and so that's binding and unbinding also. And the warmth ether with the picture forming and adapting to the environment. Yeah.
So that the taking in is life, and then it's adapting warmth, and then breaking down light ether.
Light ether, yeah, because breaking down has to do with appearing and disappearing. That's why it's the light ether. And adapting has to do with taking something in and making it warm or cool, depending on what your body needs it to be. And then on the other side, you then decide. The decision process for chemical ether has to do with deciding what things can go together and what things come apart. That's what the sorting does. Because this is what happens over here. Here things come apart, and here things are put back together. So that's the sorting process, deciding what needs to come apart and what needs to be put back together over here. And picture forming, which has to do with a form of, picture forming, there's mental images, and then there's picture forming. There's two type of ways that we have pictures in our mind. The mental images that we bring from the past, and then the new pictures we develop. And this is the new pictures. Growth is the new pictures. And those pictures are going to be connected with the world in a certain kind of way. Are they going to be disconnected? Are they going to be functionally connected or dysfunctionally connected? That's what I have to worry about when I'm in my classroom. I draw a picture on the board, and I got to ask myself, will the children see the relationships? And their ability to see the relationships will depend on how well those pictures are made in their own consciousness. So if they have reflex issues, then that means that their capacity of imitation was not full enough to develop the pictures in the proper relationship. And so if I draw, say for instance, if I just draw something on the board that looks like this, some children won't see that. You see the progression, right? Some children will not see the progression. They will not see the relationships between the pictures. And therefore, they would not be able to make a connection to the real world.
Yeah.
And so this is what's going to happen in picture forming. Growth will depend on if the children can see the relationships in their picture forming. And if they can't see the relationships, then when I try to teach them about the world, they won't be able to understand the world, and therefore won't be able to adapt the world, to their own capacities. So there's different. So when, as a teacher, I'm looking to see if the children have developed. This is related to the reflexes. If they're holding on to reflexes by compensation or by assimilation, they won't be able to see these relationships. And I will notice I will notice that I'll see them. I see that they're doing something to compensate for, or they really haven't developed the inhibition of a certain reflex. And I will notice those same children will have difficulty interpreting the pictures I draw. And so growth for them won't be possible. Cognitive growth will be stunted because of that. And I will have to go back, and I will have to try to take them back through these phases, either identify what experiences they took in that are hurting their capacity, or maybe they didn't have a full enough opportunity for imitation, to develop the proper pictures. You got to figure out whatever it is, and so a lot of times I have to go back to here and try to see if I need to strengthen this, or if it's not this, do I need to look like breakdown? Maybe it wasn't broke. Maybe what was given to them was not digestible. They were given non-digestible, activities and to do and pictures to do. We need to go back there, and so that's the kind of remedial process that we have to look at to see if we can move them on to this phase where they actually are able to do imaginative play. Because it's only through imaginative play that they're going to really be able to give birth to something new in the world.
So that the first taking in process is also all kind of provided from outside world.
Right.
And then as an adult, if taking it, we choose before.
Right.
But
exactly.
the children usually
whatever we give
just,
them.
take it in. So.
Right. And so we have to be really careful that we know that what we're offering them is something that they're going to be able to adapt and digest to their own inner being.
Yeah.
And we got to find if something has already happened that doesn't allow them, because we may give them good stuff and may find that they can't eat it because of what has already happened or what they've brought in from their previous life. And there may be something we have to do. That's why we have to know ourselves if we are bringing nutritional good stuff that has good nutrition. We have to know that. And if we are bringing good nutrition, then we can say there must be an issue here in their organization, in their warmth organization, so that we need to figure out what that is. And then we can, and so we can look at this on a physical level. We can be bringing curriculum and find that they can't take the curriculum, and then we can look on a physical level in the warmth organization.
That's also, I would like to know, because of the children's learning is opposite adult. Adult learn from here, and the children learn from there.
Exactly.
And how to relate that. Yeah.
Right. And then so we have to go look at the physical and say, this child is not able to adapt because their warmth organization is not really, and it can be affected by things like that, like the children who are so heady. Being heady is a dysfunction of the warmth organization. And so with the it's going to be hard for them to take any of this in, and we have to do some things to get them, to take them out of that place of coolness, that they tend to be in, and so that they can actually bring some warmth to what we're bringing them. They can only bring coldness to what we give them. We want them to be able to bring some warmth to it, And at times, we can bring things that are too hot. Can they cool it down? That comes on a little bit later, when they're, older. They need more of a capacity to cool some things down that might come at them as a little bit too warm. But both of those are possible. And then to digest it, to break things up, is like really.
The physical things is also, I don't know, little like the children who I had two children couldn't warm their body whole year. Even like springtime is getting all warm, but hands are still cold.
Right.
And then why you can't make an appearance of putting more layers, and then the hands are still cold.
Mm-hmm.
It just won't get warm.
Right. And so
you have to go to physical first.
Right.
Why?
And the question with that, I would think the question is we have to look at those four lower senses and see what needs to be worked on in the four lower senses. You know, is it touch? Is it well-being? Is it balance? It's kind of hard because
Yeah.
all of those things are going to be
One
interchangeable.
child seemed like a touch, but I'm kind of like confused because they go to OT, and then OT said that she is getting it, but she can't express that.
Right.
Is that?
They always.
Is she really getting it?
Well, yeah, the
She cannot
OTs.
express.
I've always had that experience with OTs. They have these benchmarks, and whether a child reaches those benchmarks doesn't show up necessarily in the classroom as capacity. It doesn't necessarily build capacity. It's almost like this developmental rather than metamorphic model. Developmentally, they've reached a benchmark, but the capacity hasn't metamorphosed. You know, it's like compensation. I think what a lot of children do when they work with OTs is they learn to compensate because the OT is asking for that compensation, and they compensate, but they don't really accommodate. They don't really undergo any real shift.
Yeah. So I'm kind of like a little. So I said that make sure you find a good OT.
Right.
So, but who knows?
Yeah, and I guess you got to talk about, we have to, where we come in, the knowledge we have to try to penetrate is this whole thing here. Okay, they're the benchmarks, but if a child is having trouble with touch, are they developing a sense of boundary? Not whether or not they can do these things, but I can see in the classroom, is there a sense of boundary developing? Because that's what sense of touch happens. You become once you feel comfortable with touch, you know where, like he says, you know where your body begins and ends, and you picture other things having boundary and beginning and end. And if you don't really develop a sense of touch, then you can't. And so, just because an OT says say that you have done all the skill things, because they're going to go to skills, they're not going to go to perceiving boundary. That would be my question. Does the child perceive boundary? They're going to jump to correspondence. They're going to say, okay, can this child pick things up? Do they have these correspondences? And if the child, like I said, can learn to compensate. And so they may not ever perceive boundary, but they may learn to, like for instance, you put some things on the table and you say, pick them up. And say, for instance, they don't really see the boundary between them. But it's like a child who learns to press really down hard. So it may look like they learn to make their letters. But in reality, they haven't developed the capacity for correspondence. They're holding themselves against that. And just because a child can learn to pick those things up, you might see that they're sticking their tongue out. They're doing all these compensatory behaviors. And so if the child is still doing compensatory behaviors, you got to think, I need to work deeper or something because this isn't happening, And I don't think that the kind of things they do in an OT session lend themselves to the child trying to meet the demand of the adult and not really working inwardly at all.
Benchmark, and then they pass the benchmark. It's exactly what happened to Julian's PP things too. Like, jumping up things and he could do everything. So, doesn't seem like to me, but
exactly, because they haven't really looked. Well, what the child's perceiving should change, not just the child's behavior, but they should perceive differently. And you got to have a way of evaluating whether or not they can perceive, not just whether they can behave a certain way, but whether they can perceive a certain way. And if they don't develop that, then this isn't really truly there.
Yeah, there's no soul capacity.
Right.
There. Yeah.
So,
I would also really like to talk about those physical things about we talked about today. This 7 process.
Right. And what are the physical correspondences you mean? Yeah. The thing about it, I finished this chapter, and I'm on the chapter right now where he talks about he's really going into the birth of the etheric. See, I have studied pretty completely only up to about here. 105, 106. And so now he's going to go more detail, I think. And I
yeah,
think,
up and then down
Yeah,
one.
right.
So like, yeah, that
that's-
seems very interesting too.
Right.
Yeah.
and so I haven't penetrated that, but I think I can be ready to bring something on that next time.
Yeah.
Because it does seem like it's going to get a little bit more detailed and specific in what's going on in the physical realm.
Yeah, I read. I've been reading the last 7 like first time I just read it, and the second time I'm kind of like start like putting all the marks,
Mm-hmm.
and then I didn't understand what is actually am I really understanding this or not? So
You have to be able to build your own picture. That's for sure. Just like you're talking here, to really grow in understanding, you gotta have a better picture form. If you can't picture form, it's not really quite the same as understanding.
yeah.
But I think I'm developing this picture of knowing that we have these this external and internal process. This comes from the outside to the inside, but it's external, taking things from the outside, and then you have the internal to the external process.
Well, can I have just one question? But the first three process is outward.
Well, they're outward, yeah.
I really didn't get it, and then the last 3 inward.
Right.
I can a little more understanding that,
Mm-hmm.
but the why first 3 is outward.
Well, because the child's consciousness is focused on bringing things from the outside world in and transforming them. And in this one, the child's focus is taking what's already in.
The focus. Okay.
Right. The focus is outward, bringing things in and transforming it. And then once it's in, the focus is taking what's in there and working with it to build up something that you can express outwardly.
I thought, what the process itself doing is outward, but it didn't really make sense to me. So
Right.
Yeah.
But the focus is
But the
material, the
yeah.
resource was out here and it's brought in. Mm-hmm. And then here the resource is in and it eventually gets expressed outwardly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it was a really good one. I hope I can observe that. So.
I wanted to mention one other thing. I wrote this thing, regurgitate. This is the opposite of digestion. It's what you get a lot with children. Young children, they won't digest. They will basically puke up. So as a kindergarten teacher, you might be bringing a curriculum to the children. Mm-hmm. And what the curriculum does is cause the children to puke up stuff they've already taken in that was not healthy for them. So a lot of times that's what we meet in the classroom. If I'm doing a circle with children, I find that there's a child who's just bringing stuff from the outside world. It's like they're puking it up.
Changing the words or
right.
different way of like being silly.
Right. And so what they have done, they have taken in stuff that was not digestible, and then when they start, it's like sometimes you're eating food and then you go running or swimming, then you puke up. And so they come into our circle and they start puking that stuff up. They start regurgitating, And so we meet that a lot. We meet this thing where stuff that hasn't been digested comes back into our classroom as a regurgitation.
Yeah. And then it's a puke out, yeah. And then we kind of often think about it, those children who do this kind of behavior. And said, am I really giving the right material? Am I giving really right material?
Right,
we think about it.
Right.
But it could be previously they already adopted and then they are puking out.
Right.
Then.
Yeah, that's what I've seen. Because it's nothing that we have given them, that they bring to it. They bring some other stuff. But the thing is, my point is, it should be expected. If you got some garbage on your stomach, mm-hmm. and it doesn't matter that we're bringing a nice circle, it causes it to stir, and it gets puked up, which it has to happen. And somehow, and this is the hard part, because it's hard to talk to the parents about, what they're feeding their children that's being puked up in our environment.
That's exactly, they kind of like, taking in, and then it doesn't really go there, and then just come out here.
Right. But even if you can't get them to understand it, you can. What I usually do is say exactly what happened. So we were doing circle, and I was singing this song, and this is what the child brought. And the parents would know where it came from. They would know they're the ones that fed that. And I can say, so your child's experience has been interrupted because they have to bring all this stuff.
Yeah.
And so the parent knows, instead of the child getting what I want them to get, all they're doing is going to school and getting sick on the stuff that I fed them last night. I got to let the parent come to that revelation. See, I don't tell the parent they have to stop feeding them. I just say, well, in my class, the child's bringing this all the time, so they aren't able to get what you were paying your money for. And so if you want them to keep bringing this, in my classroom and not getting what I have to offer, then keep feeding them that. But if you want them to come prepared to get something, different, then you may need to think about feeding them something different. Mm-hmm. And then if they don't, it's fine. But then I can say, well, your child went home and played video every day. Mm-hmm. So they brought that to my classroom. So that was their experience. They didn't get, what you were paying for me to bring, the water content.
Yeah.
They were getting sick. It's just like if they went home and ate bad food and they came in, and so the day, instead of having a good experience, they got sick in class. And if you want them to get sick in class every day, then keep feeding them that stuff every night. And their experience in class will be that they just get sick.
Yeah. Oh.
It's hard. It's easier for me to be that firm with the parents because they do expect me to teach the children something. It's so concrete. So this is what I brought today. This was my lesson today. I can say, well, your child didn't get to experience that lesson because instead of getting to experience that lesson, they were bringing this. And so that interrupted their ability to get what I was bringing. And I can be more clear in the grades because the lesson's so particular. It's harder to say clearly this is what I was bringing. But I think you all have to get a little bit able to do that. This is what I was bringing. This was my lesson today. But instead of getting my lesson, your child brought this to the classroom. And if you would like them to get, like today I was doing these things to deepen touch so the child could learn more about boundaries. I was doing this work with wellness because this was the rhythm of the day that I was trying to use to help for the child develop more episodic memory and wellness. So if you can say more specifically what you're doing, you can talk about how that experience has been interrupted by what they brought from home. And maybe the parents can start getting the idea they need to send them to school with something different.
I think I'm trying to do that, while we are doing, and then child do this.
And some parents just don't have the capacity though to do anything about it. It's different reasons that different parents will not have the capacity to change their behavior. It's just too hard for them. They can't not give the child. It's so easy. Oh my God, I just went to work all day and I just really go watch TV. They simply don't have the capacity themselves to avoid allowing the children to consume things that aren't necessarily going to be productive for them, because it's like taking them to McDonald's. It's the same thing. Watching TV is no different than having children watch TV and taking McDonald's, because I don't have time to cook, so we go to McDonald's. I don't really have time to create an environment of play for you that's going to be engaging, so I'll let you watch TV or watch a video game.
Yeah.
And
I think it's much more, my issue in my classroom is more parents explaining, parents giving information.
Right.
That's a really big things. About the TV thing, they try to do that, reduce that and the things. So I think this year, except the one child that keep bringing, and then that child bringing the experience of media is not really watching, but learning about the things, and then bringing. So child doesn't really exactly praying what he didn't see it, but he got the information about it, and he just keep talking about that information, like a Pokemon.
Right.
He never see a Pokemon video or playing game, but the father explained about the Pokemon and show the picture, and he just keep talking about let's do the Pokemon, but he doesn't really know what exactly to do.
Right.
But he just keeps saying, let's do the Pokemon.
Right.
Pokemon.
Yeah, it's like parents communicating to their children. They themselves communicate. It's like, we you remember Laura, who, I don't know, were you here when we had that whole thing when Laura had to leave?
Yeah.
And Laura thought of herself as a teacher from the point of view of her head to the child's head, even from her head to the child's heart. She couldn't think, even though she wanted to do Waldorf, she could not think about Waldorf except in a heady way. So when she brought stuff in the classroom, even though her effort was to try to be a Waldorf teacher, she was always going from here. And then when mentors would come in, people could see it. This is from your head. This is from your head, And even though she's thinking about Waldorf, she's bringing it out from her head. And parents get the same trap. They just can't think of things in out of another part of the body. They can't think out of the heart. They can't think out of the limbs.
That's really challenging. Yeah.
And to be able to teach them to, okay, when I'm going to talk to my child, I'm going to talk to the children out of my limbs. I'm going to talk about doing, not about what something is, but what something does. Or I'm going to talk out of my feeling life if that's appropriate, and learning to talk in the threefold way.
Oh, the feeling life talking is
They do that too.
Infant.
Yeah.
Oh, you feel sad, or you are upset.
Right.
And then they just use those words
right.
all the time, and then you cannot control anything.
Right.
Yeah.
So that may be something that you all needs to be investigated more. Is how can you really help the children, help the parents learn about their own threefoldness? Because they're stuck in their wherever they're stuck at.
Yeah.
We
were trying, and we gave about the life science workshop, things like that to the parents, and I still don't know they really like it, but if they really can do it. Right.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. It's like it's kind of hard to. That's the thing. How do you educate parents? Do you have workshops? How do you really educate parents? How do they really get it?
Yeah.
And I think my feeling is they get it in the relationship they have between you, the child, you, and them. I think journaling is more effective than having a workshop. Because if I have a child who I'm having trouble with, and the parents journal and I'm journaling, we're communicating back and forth in real time, then that would be my process of educating. I would educate through the journaling, I think, because then the parent is more invested, than if you go to a workshop and you start hearing these ideals, and you don't necessarily in the moment feel the connection with your child, unless you can do the workshop in a way that really makes it relevant for the issues they're having with the children. And then that's the foundation for then kind of getting them to penetrate it.
Yeah, we did that part, we did a skit, what's happening in the morning in the family. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it's hard. Parent communication. I mean, I always take
you told me one time, good teacher is how to know how to deal with parents.
Right.
So.
The thing about it, I know it's hard. When Steiner says, "Oh, don't even try to explain it to them."
What do you do at the Molly's school with parents?
Well, I don't really engage with the parents hardly at all. Mostly, I'm gonna get my work is with the teachers. Of course, they're supervising them on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
So, and right now we're not.
Do they do any